It's really important to, when we're talking about government reporting, to remember the big picture, like why are we doing this? And I can share this with you if you want, but there's a reason that the freedom of the press is included in the Constitution. And it's because the government wields all the power, and it needs to be transparent to the rest of the public. And what I find is that 99% of everything the government does, it doesn't really need a watchdog. It really needs a megaphone. Most of the time, the government is, especially on the local level, it's doing things well and efficiently and honestly and everything else. So what the government really needs is to make sure that the people out in the community know what's happening, so that there's understanding and there's clarity, and there's not like rumors and false conspiracies out there. That's what I have found. We also need to be aware of that 1% moment where something is amiss, and the reason that we catch those 1%, problems is because we're always there. And that's why we need more manpower, more women power, more everything, because we want to be reporting on government more. And so that's why I wanted to make sure to kind of walk through some of what we're doing and how we do it. So the Observer mission is build bridges of understanding through government transparency. So that should always be at the heart of what is driving all of our stories. The first draft of history. You don't want to like these kind of grandiose ideas to paralyze you and make it feel like it's too hard to write something because you want it to be perfect. But it should kind of keep in mind, like we're trying to do something that is important, and so it takes some dedication sometimes. And sometimes when something might seem a little boring that the government's doing, it takes a little bit of creativity to be interesting and find the angle that is interesting, even though, it might not be obvious. And we want to be thorough and accurate, because someday someone's going to refer to this story that you're doing. When you're covering the government, I think this is important, and this is a phrase I've used a lot. Headlines are the currency of news. The more headlines we can find in a government meeting, the better. It's efficient to, and I just heard a ding, so I don't know if that's Abby's note taker again. I'm just going to ignore that one.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. It doesn't matter. But if there's like a 5-hour government meeting, sometimes we only really need to report on 1 or 2 things. But if you're looking for them, you can usually find many other things that could become stories if we have time for them. And that's, again, why I'm trying to get more writers involved, so we can do more of it. Find as many as you can. And that doesn't mean that you write a headline with like, a 1-sentence story. It means that you might need to like do a little bit more digging afterward. But finding more headlines is a good thing. And that's part of what makes a reporter extra skilled, is the person who can spot those headlines. And that takes some practice, some experience. A lot of it does take the context. Why does this story matter? A lot of times you don't know unless you've been covering that government for a little while and kind of understand the backstory. Usually anything that the government does, there is a backstory, and there's a reason that they put staff on it, and they're changing a law or something like that. It might be that there was some strange case that brought up the fact that there is like a gap in the law, and now they need to write a new law to fix it, but they don't always explain all that necessarily. And so you have to be kind of like, use your imagination a little bit. That's why creative writing actually can come in handy with this. Use your imagination a little bit. Try to imagine, how does this impact somebody? And how can we like make sure that is clear to the rest of the community? So again, the mission statement, build bridges of understanding. That's the key to what we're doing. We're not trying to play gotcha. We're not trying to criticize anyone. We're not trying to make anybody look good or bad. We're just trying to provide transparency by reporting accurately on what happens. And never, if anybody accuses us of being biased one way or another, then we want to fix it immediately. We want to, be aware that sometimes people are going to criticize what we're doing because they don't agree with what the government did or something like that. But we always want to be neutral, clear, and fair. Does anybody have anything to say about that first section that I just mentioned, that I just went through? This is a lot of kind of like just explanation, info dump, but hopefully it will be helpful and kind of get a little orientation. Okay, so that's the mission. I think this is kind of like a short version of what I think basically all the skills of a journalist are included in these categories. And this is something that might seem familiar to you, Abby and Lexi, because I believe we talked about this in the internship a few years ago. Proof it, sell it, all of it. And this is just kind of like a framework. So that way, if I ever say, I noticed that in this story, I think what we need to work on is the proof it part, because every story could probably be improved in some way, so we have to try to focus or try to be aware that this is a lifelong quest to get good at all kinds of writing, whether it's creative writing or government reporting. But it is a skill that does need to be kind of honed, and I think that if there's enough interest in it, it can definitely happen. And you probably are better at it than you think to begin with. Just so you know, Lila, Abby and Lexi haven't really done much or any. I'm not sure if you've done any like actual government reporting. So they've done other kind of reporting, but not this. So that's kind of the background of it. So the proof it means basically the technical side of writing. Be precise, use spell check. There's no excuse for having misspelled words in 2025. It should be, and it might sound kind of like hardcore, but you think of how you feel when you're reading a blog online and there's misspellings. This is not this can hurt our credibility. If we get an incorrect fact, we spell someone's name wrong, it hurts our ability to do this, build bridges of understanding. We have to be a tool that is so trustworthy that we can help solve this societal problem, at least do our part by, providing this kind of service to people. So being accurate is really, really important. AP style stands for Associated Press. There's an online style guide. This is what most newspapers around the world use, and it's what we use. So there's different things. I'm not going to go into detail on it. Some of you know a lot about it already, but just sometimes there's multiple ways to spell something, and there is a correct way in Associated Press, or there's a correct way to shorten month names and things like that. Those are not big deal to the readers, so it's something that can basically be kind of addressed like behind the scenes if there's any issues. But this is just to reiterate, we need to double check what we're doing. If there is a way to fact check and look something up in a different source, we should do it. And I know that takes extra time, but that's the kind of standard that we need to be following. This is a big one because I think a lot of times we're a little shy. Writers are shy. And sometimes you have to, after a meeting is over, you didn't really understand something, you got to go up to the staff member who made the presentation and say, I am not really sure what you meant by this. Can you help me understand it? And what is that person's attitude going to be if you did that, do you think? What do you think, Lexi?
I think that they would take it as like a respect thing in a way of, instead of you reporting on what you think it is, you're trying to make sure it's exactly what they're saying.
Exactly. It sends a message for your motivations. They're not going to be annoyed. And I think that's that's the scary part, going up to like a professional. They've been in the business for 20 years and they're spitting off all this information that you're not familiar with. They know that you're new, but they also know that they depend on you to do a good job, to be out to make sure this is accurate. So they will probably say, oh, let me meet with you. Let me, they'll bend over backwards sometimes just to make sure you've got everything correct. So if there's any question, we always want to go and ask for help because we got to get it right. So that's the proof it part. That's the technical side. You're all sitting here in this webinar because I feel good about your ability to write clear, clearly and correctly. There's some people that just struggle with that from the beginning, don't use punctuation right. You guys are all good at that. So the sell it part of PSA, proof it, sell it, all of it, is sell it. Now this means that you're trying to make the story as interesting as possible to the reader. That is not just for clickbait purposes. That is because if we don't do a good job of it, then we don't get their attention, and people don't read it. They're too, just like all of us, we're busy, we get lazy, we want it fed to us easily. So we have to pay attention to, is my headline interesting enough? It might be accurate, but it might not be that interesting. For example, City Council discusses e-bikes. That's fine, but is it really big news that they discussed e-bikes? Maybe if they weren't planning on it before and now they did all of a sudden, then there's a surprise element to it, then maybe that is, but that's not a really good headline. What we want is specificity. Spit test is specificity, priority, irony, tease. Specificity meaning, what did they discuss about e-bikes? What was the change that they made? The priority means, who is this really about? Is it about the city council? Is everybody dying to know what the city council did? Probably not. Most people are more interested in the e-bikes. So you could change your headline to be about e-bikes instead of the city council by just reversing. E-bikes are now restricted to something, and maybe you don't even need the city council in the headline. Maybe you say the e-bikes are restricted by the city council, and there's active passive voice in there that might sometimes need to be considered. But specificity and priority, give me a detail that I can see, an image, that's specificity. Priority, make sure it's about the right thing. It's not just about the city council because I went to the city council meeting. Make it about the subject that people care about. Irony means it's the opposite of what we thought was going to happen. It's surprise. So the fact that the city council discussed e-bikes, it's not surprising. It was on the agenda. Everybody knew that they were going to. The surprising thing is the shift that might have happened, the split vote, the somebody changing their mind, the surprising conflict that arose because the advocates for e-bikes actually changed their position or something like that. So capturing the irony in the story, in the headline, not just bury the irony halfway through the story, put it in the headline. That's kind of the temptation is to tell the kind of vanilla kind of basics at the top and then start getting into it, because it's kind of hard sometimes to cram all that information into a headline. But that's what we got to do. Try to do that. And then tease. This is something that if you just do it, if you just say at the beginning, let's say the headline is like this: here's what the city council changed in the e-bike ordinance, in the e-bike law. That would be a way to tease. It's like you're promising that you're going to answer a question later in the story or in the story. That is one way to get people to dive into the story. It's clickbait if you don't really answer it. That's just pulling the rug out. We don't want to do that. But there are times when this is a great way to write the story in an engaging way, so that way people feel like, oh, I want to know what's going on there. Now you've got them connected to the community and their government in a way that they weren't before, just because you put in a little extra time to try to sell the story in a better way to them. So that's sell it. Now, the headline and the lead being the first paragraph or two, that also should follow the same rules. You want specificity, priority consideration, irony, play up the irony, make sure to identify what it is in the story and include it in that top of that story. And a tease sometimes is appropriate. Sometimes the T in spit might be actually better to, oh, wow, that's, I didn't know I had annotation tools on. But it might be appropriate to try to, instead of tease, to tell everything that you can and make it, a long, try to cram as much information at the top of the story as you can without necessarily teasing. The other part of sell it is get a strong photo. I mean, it might not seem like writing is all about, writing, or photos have nothing to do with writing a story maybe, but it really does. That's might be the reason that people click on the story, is because of, let's see, how do I get off of this? Stop annotating. Somebody might click on the story because of your photo, not because of your headline. So if you can get a good photo that goes along with your story, it makes a big difference. We sometimes just use like a stock image or like a generic news photo. That's not good. We don't want to do that, we want to do that as infrequently as possible, but sometimes we have to. Okay, so we're talking about proof it, sell it, all of it. The all of it means get all the right stories in your beat. If you're covering a government well, you want to try to get everything you can, be comprehensive. And that means source development. Who are the people in the government that are going to be the most likely to know what's going on, so that you can find out, before other people do, and so that you can explain it in a way that's really effective. In a government, it might be the elected officials, but also certain staff members. It might be certain people who attend the meetings that are just residents, but kind of talk and know. So you want to get plugged into them, which might mean that sometimes for part of the process of covering a meeting would be just like, get there early and talk to a few people. Say, hey, my name is Abby. I haven't met you yet. I'm here covering the story for the Observer. What's your name? And what brings you here today? And it might be that they're there because of a certain agenda item. And just understanding and getting source development, trade contact information with people, and build that up. And over time, you get to know all the people that really matter in a beat. How do I know if it's a story? Remember the whole idea that headlines are the currency of news. How do I know if I've found a good headline or not, or a story that is actually worth writing about? And then, how big of a story should I make it? Is it a big deal? Is it not a big deal? And this is what another acronym is. Again, Abby and Lexi might be familiar with this pitch test. Passion, irony, timeliness, conflict, helpfulness. Passion is self-explanatory, hopefully. Somebody related to this issue hopefully cares a lot about what's going on. Irony, again. Irony is the gold that we're looking for. Surprise. If there's nothing surprising about something that's happening, then it might not really be news at all. Think about it that way. Airplane lands safely at airport. It's not news. It happens all the time. That's what we expect. If airplane lands safely despite being on fire, now we have a headline that's got surprise to it. So that is something to always be looking for. What's surprising? What just changed? What's new? The news has to be new. Timeliness, we only write about things that happen in that week, pretty much. That meeting, that day, that's what we're looking for. Something's happening now. That's what gets people excited and wants to read and consume the news. Conflict, we're trying to stir up conflict, but are the city council members disagreeing with each other? Does one disagree with the city manager? Does the city council disagree with the residents who are talking? Do the residents disagree with themselves? If they are, then it might be a good indication that there's a story there, because we want to build bridges of understanding, as it says at the top. What are the two sides saying? Let's bring some clarity and some new information that would help this conversation to be resolved or not resolved. We're not trying to resolve any conflicts. We're trying to make sure that people understand each other. So if there is conflict, now you can see, I can help this because I can help interview both sides and explain what is going on. Helpfulness is kind of like the practical side of the government actions. Are they spending your tax dollars? Then that's helpful to know what they're doing with them. Is the government offering free sandbags during a hurricane or before a hurricane? That's helpful. It's practical. It's also practical to know, for example, that a new restaurant is being built nearby. That's practical. It can, in fact, impacts your life. So this can be a good test. If you're not really sure, is this a good story or not? Let's put it through the pitch test. Is there any passion here? Does anybody care a lot about what's going on? What's the surprise? Is it happening now? Is there any conflict? How helpful is it to people to know this? If you only see 2 or 3 of these, then it might be that it's not very long. It might be that you can tell all that stuff in a short amount of time. You know, it depends, but sometimes all it is timely and helpful, and that's it. Like, there are now sandbags available at City Hall. You don't really need to say a whole lot more than that potentially. It's just timely and helpful, and that's it. So that could be a little brief, and you try to make it as interesting as possible. You write it and you move on, and you don't have to worry about making a big deal about it. But getting all of it, that can be part of it. You want to make sure that we're a trusted source. People know where they can go to find this kind of information. Thorough fact finding, all of it means that you are getting all the sides, both sides, the context, the history, with context and history. That would be a good thing to keep in mind. The history of an issue, and just being thorough. So does anybody have anything to say here? And we are going to get to something more practical next. But does anybody have anything to say about this PSA kind of framework for how to be a reporter the observer way? Abby, anything comment on here? Abby is muted. Actually, everybody's muted. Am I muted? I'm not, right? Okay.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
I just want to see, do you have anything to comment about the PSA, you know, these skills of a reporter? What stands out to you? Anything?
I don't think so. Like, I need to ask any questions, but I guess what stands out would be the irony, because that's something sometimes I would have trouble in with writing. I remember I'd ask you a lot because I was like, what do you mean ironic? Because it wouldn't really like ring a bell to me, but when you explained it more and more, it became more easier. But I felt like a lot of people like that ironic aspect to it.
Yeah, it's not, I sometimes use the irony as kind of like a catch-all for just anything that's surprising or newsy, because usually it does mean that something has shifted. Another way to think of it as change, but not just change because, you know, the weather went from 85 degrees to 86 degrees. That's a change. But is it a surprise that it happened in a certain way? So, for example, Abby, you wrote a story about a rapper in Flagler Beach. Where's the irony there? One irony is like, wow, I didn't know there was a rapper who lived in Flagler Beach, a music producer in his house. That's kind of cool. Like it's something we didn't know about. It's unusual. You think about, you know, rappers being in some big city, not in a little sleepy beach town down the road from us. So that in and of itself helps to create this interest. And so, yeah, anything else? Lexi, anything you want to say about that, or Lila?
I don't think so. I mean, it all feels very like, I feel like I've heard it so many times and I feel like I've used it so many times. I have at my desk, like, I literally have a sticky note with like the spit test on it because it was something that I just tried to ingrain in my brain. Between you and Darlene going over it so many times.
I will say that I really feel like these tests are tools, and if you get stuck and you're like, I don't know how to write this headline, use the spit test. It's a tool that can help you say, okay, specificity. What is something specific? How can I paint the picture? What's a word that kind of I need to use? You know, in this, you know, e-bike is clearly something that, you know, is specific that I need to include in the headline. So now, what is that? Is that really what the story is about? Is it about e-bike laws and how they're changing? Then what's the surprise? What's the change? So I think that they can be tools as we're kind of trying to improve a headline or to write a headline. Okay, so the last section here, and then I want to look at some actual agendas, is in the government meeting, there's a few things. I like these acronyms and abbreviations, as you can tell. But again, it's part of like a tool. If you're stuck, it can help. So prepare, pivot, and produce. This is something to think about as you're actually sitting there in the meeting. You have to prepare by looking at the agenda. The agendas are public. They're on the city's website. You need to be prepared to see what is the difference between all these different things on the agendas. Proclamations, presentations. Usually a proclamation is just a ceremonial thing like, rah, rah, it is Fire Prevention Week. How much news value is there? Well, it happens every year. Nothing's really happened. They didn't do anything. They just wanted to let people know that it's timely. So we have timeliness for Fire Prevention Week. So in the pitch test, we're looking for passion. Sometimes in a proclamation, there is a lot of passion. The person who asked for it to be on the agenda might be very passionate about it. So that's one thing that sometimes we overlook with proclamations. A lot of times the government reporting that we do in the Observer, we do so many meetings, and there's so many things that need to happen that we have to write about, that the proclamations just kind of come and go and we don't do anything about them. But some group went through a lot of trouble to get that on the agenda, and sometimes there could be a good story. It might not always be sitting there in the meeting, but they might give a little explanation of what happened, of why they care so much. And maybe you can write a story about that just based on what they say. So that's passion. Irony, sometimes there's not a whole lot of irony to it. It's just a passion thing and it's timely. But maybe that can turn into a story without much further effort. Sometimes that might say, wow, I want to go meet that person and spend an hour interviewing them, because that could be a big story if I get the whole narrative behind it. So that can help. Presentations, sometimes it's just for information purposes for the elected body. It might be like a staff member that just says, here's what's happening with the taxes right now. And they're not acting on it. They're just saying, like, here's an explanation. Those are sometimes hard to write about because they're not taking any action. The action is sometimes what what it feels like. Here's what the news is, the who, what, when, where, why, which we'll get to in a second. But a presentation sometimes can lead to a really good story. If there's a memorable quote, that can also be a real a key, like, yeah, I'll leave it at that. Resolutions and ordinances, these are basically different words for laws or official government actions. So on an agenda, you're going to see resolution to do this. That usually takes one vote. It's just an action from the council, but it is a vote official act. An ordinance is usually a law change, and they take 2 votes, one at official business meetings. And so usually it takes like a month or 2 to get through the whole process of an ordinance. Business versus consent. Sometimes there are items on, sometimes the government meeting calls it a business meeting, a business portion of the meeting, like general business. And sometimes resolutions and ordinances are kind of included under the category of business of the meeting. And then there's the consent part of an agenda a lot of times. And that means there might be 2 to 15 items that they're not going to talk about at all. It might be sometimes like the city has to buy these chemicals to make the power plant work, or the water utility work. They're not going to discuss it. They did the same thing last year. They just want to vote for all 15 things at once. Motion to approve the whole consent agenda. I will make the motion. Okay, we all pass it. Okay, now let's move on. So, but sometimes in consent, there are things that could be worth writing about. Sometimes they're just, a standard operation and you don't need to mention it at all. But every now and then they put something on consent that was a big deal, and now they think it's all resolved. So then they'll just put it on there. But if we didn't write about it yet, sometimes something interesting could sneak through if we're not paying attention to the consent item. And then this is just a category of 2 different types of meetings. There are business meetings that mean we're going to vote, and then there's workshops, which means we're not voting, we're just hearing this and discussing things so that we can vote on them the next time. So I know business and business is repeated here, but it's kind of like this portion of the meeting versus this is the type of meeting it is. It's important because you might be reporting on a workshop, and if you say the city council voted to do this, there's something wrong. If it's a workshop, we miss something here because they don't actually vote in workshops. Prepare includes knowing who's there, knowing who the attorney is, what's the name of these people. Every elected body, at least in our form of government here in our counties, they have elected officials. They're either called commissioners or council members, and they hire two people, a city manager or a county administrator or whatever they would call the superintendent of schools. That's basically the CEO of the organization with all the staff under them. And then there's an attorney. So these elected officials hire only two people. They hire and fire them. So their relationship with the elected officials is important to keep in mind. The manager wants to please the elected officials and make sure they're doing the job well and carrying out the vision. But the elected officials also can't go and meddle with what the manager is doing on a day-to-day basis. So knowing the players and the roles is an important part of preparing for reporting here. The other thing is to actually the mechanics of writing, get your Pinpoint ready. Pinpoint is a Google tool. You can go visit it here and you can get a free, you can use it for free, but you can upload an audio file and it will transcribe and spit it back out in a PDF that you can copy and paste and use. So that's a free tool that I use. You can also use a free version of otter.ai. I'll just put that here, or use otter.ai. But there's lots of different ways to get transcriptions of things, and that's a good idea because we want to make sure that the quotes are accurate. And we can talk about mechanics of some of the quotes another time if we get there. So preparation is key. It doesn't mean hours and hours, but it does mean just being kind of aware before you go, and you don't want to just walk into the meeting blind if you can avoid it. If you've done it many times, then sometimes you can get by because you kind of know these players already and you're just looking at the agenda cold. Okay, the second thing, and then we're almost there, we're almost done. And then I want to look at a couple of agendas. Pivot. Prepare, then pivot. You might look at the agenda and say, yep, that's it. I'm writing about that story. And then it turns out that there was nothing surprising, or there was no conflict that you thought there was going to be. So we always have to be ready to shift gears. And this is kind of hard. If you're a control freak sometimes, like I am, you want to just follow the plan. But being a good reporter means you have to be ready to shift gears and cover the other thing that is more interesting as you discover it. And that can be exciting. I mean, if you're on top of the change and the shift, then people are going to then say, oh, we need to go and read what Abby's writing every week because she knows what's going on. Or this is what Lila is writing about, then it must be important because we've seen that she follows the most important stuff. So that's something to, being able to pivot is really key, which it's empowering. Let your curiosity be your guide. If you think it's interesting, maybe someone else will too, and they probably will. Back to the how do I know if it's a story? We have to keep evaluating. I repeated this on this bullet point because keeping that in mind is key to say whether I should be chasing that and pivoting or not. In the meeting, this is a good thing to ask afterward. If you're just like, say you're calling your mom on the way home from a meeting, or you're telling a friend about what happened, what would you say? What was the most passionate moment? Where did someone's energy get up? What was the biggest surprise in the meeting? And until you go to some of them, it might be hard to spot the biggest surprise, but sometimes it'll be obvious. What was the biggest change or shift? What was the biggest conflict? Where did two people disagree the most in a meeting? That's just following the pitch test, by the way. Passion, irony, conflict, right? PIC, those are the big things that are going to tell you, okay, there's a story here. This isn't just a little news brief. I'm going to write several hundred words about this because there's a lot going on because there's passion and irony and conflict. And it happened today, so there's timeliness. And if it's got something to do with the government, then it has something to do with your taxes, and therefore it's always helpful. So it's always a practical thing. So using the pitch test after the meeting can also help to kind of guide whether you're going to write, what you're going to write about, and whether you need to pivot to something else. So we're talking about prepare, pivot, and then produce. This is some of the mechanics of the writing here, but this is a key that I learned from Flagler Live. Actually, I talked to Pierre Tristram about this one time, and he was publishing a story as soon as the meeting was over, and I was like, "How did you do that?" And he said, "Don't stop writing." So if there's an agenda meeting going on, there's an agenda going on, or they're talking about one agenda item. If you don't think you're going to be writing a story about what they're saying, then you should be writing the previous one. Just keep writing it. Right? If you're not taking notes, then start writing the story. You can start by writing the nut graph. That means everything in a nutshell needs to go up there at the first or second paragraph anyway. So that can help to guide the rest of the story. Who, what, when, where, and why. Who's it about? What exactly happened? In the government meeting, sometimes that's pretty easy to tell because they voted on it. This is what happened. The staff member gave a presentation on this day at this location because the city council asked for it. And that might be basically just kind of establishing shot of your story. This is what's happening. That's going to have to be up there high on the story. You could write that before you write the rest of the story and start chipping away at it and putting things in. Don't stop writing helps you to be timely. You want to publish the story as soon as you can, because that's when people care about it the most, and that's how you can be relevant in the community. And again, that's not because we're trying to get the most clicks. That means we're trying to fulfill this mission. We want to build bridges of understanding. That means we want our version of this story to be read and not get lost by being 3 or 5 days late. And then no one cares about it anymore. Meanwhile, the rumor mill is already taken over. So being timely really does matter to fulfill this mission. A lead follows the spit test. Again, I copied this because when you're writing, this is part of the process to make sure that you're producing what you want to produce. And again, include that in the lead. Include the passion, irony, and conflict in the lead wherever possible. Sometimes you can do a good job or sometimes you can get really creative with your leads by, doing something more on a narrative level. If somebody explains like, hey, it's fire prevention week, and it was so great because, the other day we were, the firefighters were going in to, help save somebody, and the kids stopped, dropped, and rolled, and it was great. You could use that and kind of like not recreate it in a way that's like a fictionalized version of it, but could you imagine writing the story where it's like firefighters rush into a house in Palm Coast? I mean, you can use your creative skills sometimes in setting a scene, even by just explaining what the person said in a different way. So there's obviously a lot more on the practical level in writing these stories that is you can't encapsulate in like a 1.5 page document here, but I think that this is kind of like a good framework. And what I'm planning to do is keep adding to this and make this more of like a longer manual that might address very specific things, but I'll do that sometime as I go along. So it's 5:15, about halfway through what I was planning to do. Does anybody have any questions so far about what we're doing?
I just have a quick question about what you just went over. Just out of curiosity, could you maybe like give an example of a time you had to pivot?
Yeah, I mean, if honestly, it happens a lot. Like I'm trying to think of something specific, but sometimes like at the beginning of a week, I might think, well, I'm going to do a story about the stormwater budget, because they're spending a lot of money on maintaining the public mowing areas, and it's costing a lot more than they thought. So that was my story. Well, then an important person in the community just got killed in a car crash.
Right.
And at the meeting, the first time I heard about it is at this meeting. And they start the meeting by doing the pledge, and then the mayor says, you know, so sorry that we're so sorry to hear that this car crash just happened out you know, on this road, and you know, we're so sorry to lose this respected leader in the community, and you know, our prayers are with that family. Okay, now let's move on to the first thing on the agenda. And you're like, okay, that's passion, that's surprise, that's conflict. Someone just got hit by a car. I mean, it can be literal as like the elements, man versus nature, can be the conflict, but a struggle of some sort, you know, something tragic happens, it's kind of built in. It's timely, it just happened. It's helpful to know that this person just, you know, this important person is now, you know, now died. So you pretty much have what you need there, and it might be the best in that situation to leave the computer there, leave their laptop there on the desk, step out of the meeting, and contact your other sources that hopefully you have, you know, we developed, and I can help with a lot of that. But say, call the sheriff's office, public information office, officer, and say, the mayor just said this person died in a car crash. Can you give me more information, please? And they probably have more information, and maybe it's not very much. And maybe at that point you need to go back into the, but they can tell you some details. Yes, this happened. You know, we can't trust one source. Basically, you should always be skeptical. When one person gives some information, hopefully it's verifiable, and you can fact check it. And if you can't, then we should be wary and careful, and be prepared to prove to your editor, which would be me or Jarlene, yes, Lexi or Abby or Lila, where did you get this information? Well, I saw it, you know, I heard somebody saying it in the hallway as I was going into the meeting. That's not good enough, right? It can't just be hearsay and rumor. It's got to be fact checkable. Otherwise, when people go to our website and read what we're doing, they need to trust that we have done our homework and gotten confirmation on it. So if the mayor says something in a meeting, we can't necessarily say, oh, that must be true. We want to try to find more information and you know, see what to verify it. But that would be one example. It might be that was the most important thing that was said in the whole meeting, and the rest of it is something that, okay, we'll have to get to it. And the good thing is, in most of these meetings, they're being live streamed on YouTube. So you can pause it and go back to it. Even while you're sitting there in a government, you know, building, you could do that and go back to it and rewatch something, or, you know, whatever. So there are definitely, there's a lot of advantage to having this all being recorded live in front of you. So it's not as much stress like, oh, if I start working on something else, then I'm going to lose all this other stuff. That's how it used to be, but now it's all recorded for you so you can get it. So that's that would be one way of pivoting. But, and again, sometimes the biggest reasons to pivot are what is said that's not on the agenda. Like you might have 10 agenda items. Some of them are really short, a couple of them are long. And then at the very end of the meeting, they always allow the elected officials and the city attorney and the city manager or county administrator, Flagler Beach city manager, whatever it might be, they'll give everybody a chance to mention something that's not on the agenda. And some of them might be like, I went to Little League opening day this weekend and it was great. And you know, so glad that we have so many great Little League kids in our community. That's all I have, Mayor. I mean, that's not really government action. Probably don't need to worry about that. Although it could be like, maybe I should do something about opening day. That's not the best example, but sometimes that will happen. And then somebody else might say, I have learned that the city manager, or that the mayor has just tried to fire staff members, and that's against our city charter. So I am asking we need to report the mayor to the ethics commission. That happened when I was at a meeting. It happened late at night. It was like 10 o'clock at night. I'm sitting there at the meeting. It wasn't on the agenda, but it was by far the biggest news of the day. And it happened at the very end. There's discussion. So I got quotes about all this stuff happening, but that's one example of pivoting.
Yeah, thank you. Because I knew what it was, but I just wanted to hear something that would happen in like a government meeting or what have you.
Yep. So there's a lot of sort of like, in a sense, there's some safety or some comfort in the government meeting, because unlike other kinds of stories where you got to go chase stuff down, for the most part, the government meeting is all sitting right there. It's self-contained. All the staff members are there. It's public record. They've got the agenda here that you can see, and you don't know who gave the presentation. Well, it's right there in the agenda. So it's kind of like, in a way, it's kind of made easy for you because they are trying to be transparent. And you're basically relaying some of this information to people with sometimes more context than they give in the meeting, and that's where you can provide extra value. But most people don't go to the meetings. Sometimes 1 to 50 people will show up, but there's 110,000 people who live in Palm Coast. So most people do not know what happened in the meeting. So that's one of the big things one of the big services that we're providing by doing this. Okay, so what I want to do next is I'm going to go to the Flagler County government website. Okay. So that's the kind of like part 1 of the training. This is part 2 out of 2. Flagler County government website. Now, in these, every government website has similar elements to them, where you're going to find something like this: events and meetings. This is at the Ormond Beach City Commission meetings, Flagler Beach. I'll show you. This is the I'll share this one. This is a Flagler Beach meeting. Flagler Beach homepage, cityofflaglerbeach.com. So here they've got government, and they go over here to agendas and meetings, right? So you can pretty much every city website is going to have something like this: agendas and meetings. So I'm going to go there. Did that share also? Okay, good. So in this agendas and meetings, we need to find, and it looks okay. So you see this past events here. Let's see, on Tuesday the 7th, there was a planning and architectural review board meeting. Wednesday, there's a parks ad hoc meeting. So there's a lot of different, sometimes advisory boards and different meetings. The big one where all the biggest things are happening is usually the city commission. So this is happening tomorrow night in Flagler Beach at 5:30. I thought that there was something earlier in October. Oops. And I don't see it, so we might not have missed it. I was kind of worried that we missed kind of a big story. But let's just take this one for example. Thursday, October 9th at 5:30. So that's tomorrow night. Let's go click on that one. Is that one sharing also? You got, nope, it's not. Okay, so I need to go to this. So when I clicked on that, I went to this. Okay, this is the agenda for this meeting. This is all public record. Anybody in the world can go look at this anytime. This is by law, I think. They're required to post their agenda so that way everyone in the community knows what they're doing. They can't go and do things behind closed doors and like change your tax rate and approve like buildings being built, without the public being aware. It's the Florida and most states, I think, have something like this. They have called the Sunshine Law. Means that everything has to be done out in the open. The city council, city commissioners in Flagler Beach, they cannot meet individually and talk about this agenda. That would be illegal. They can only talk about this agenda with each other if they're in a public meeting where the public can attend. So that's why these meetings are really the center and the heart of what we're doing. So you can download this agenda packet. See over here on the left, there's the agenda, which is like a 1-page, thing, and then, or 3 pages. See up here, 1 out of 3. And then there's also the agenda packet, which means it has like multiple pages of backup on each one of these items usually. So I want to spend a few minutes just looking through this city commission agenda. They're going to call the meeting to order. It's at 2nd Street in Flagler Beach, so you can just show up there if somebody's going to cover it. And we can talk about that another time, but they're going to do the pledge. They're going to say, do we want to change the agenda? Usually no, but sometimes they'll say, this item has been delayed till next time because the applicant wasn't really prepared, something like that. So that could happen. And they have to, by law, make that change up here at the beginning, so that way it's officially done, and they have to vote on that. Public comments. This is an example where, and this is typically what happens, it's about 30 minutes long at the most. Sometimes it'll take 5 minutes, and sometimes it'll take the actual full 30, where citizens can get up and talk about whatever they want as long as the items are not on the agenda. Not on the agenda. Because if there's something on the agenda, you wait until that item is being discussed. But you could say, hey, I think we should bring back fireworks on the 4th of July. Someone could get up and talk about whatever they want that's not on the agenda. They have 3 minutes, and they have to be nice, basically. So sometimes there's items there that are discussed that are actually the most interesting thing that happens. They might be the most passionate, but they also don't have to have they don't have to fact check what they're saying. So we have to be really careful, and sometimes they might say something that sounds very intriguing, but we can't just report on what they said without providing the context. That would not be building bridges of understanding. That would just be being a megaphone for someone who's upset, and we don't want to do that. We want to, if we think there's a story in what someone's saying, then we need to look at, okay, well, what facts do I need to check in there? What's the other side to this story? Who is potentially being implicated by what they're saying? And how do I get access to that person and ask them what they think about the issue? So public comment is definitely something to pay attention to. Sometimes you get up, I went to the Daytona Beach City Commission meeting a few weeks ago, and a guy got up and said, I'm homeless, and went on to ramble for 3 minutes and said nothing that I really understood very much of, contradicted himself, and sat back down. What do you do with that? Well, probably you just ignore it and move on, because it is what it is. But every now and then they might say something that does warrant a further research. So then there's the consent agenda. The only thing on the consent agenda here is the minutes of other meetings. You can probably ignore that, but sometimes there'll be a lot of things on consent. Then we go to general business. So this is why I mentioned in this government reporting here, when it talks about know the difference between business and consent, that's an example of what I'm talking about. So back to this agenda. Consider agreements for the purchase lease of golf course properties. There's a golf course in Flagler Beach. I think it's owned by the city. I can't remember all the details. It's been going on for a long time. If you're going to cover this meeting, then it might be good to Google this, look at what Flagler Live and the Observer have written about this golf course in Flagler Beach, so you get a little bit of the background. But there's also this, where is it? It's Staff report. Okay, consider agreements. Can you see what I'm doing over here? Consider agreements for the purchase of. So let's look at what the staff report is on this. This is one of the real secrets. It's not really a secret. It's all public out here, but this is one of your best friends if you're covering a government meeting, because the staff has to teach the city commission what's going on. The city commission isn't necessarily experts in any of this stuff. They just got elected. So Dale Martin, the city manager, and his staff prepare these reports, and they tell you the background of it. Well, the city acquired the property in 2013 and 2022. They leased it here. It was then assigned here. And you can go through and read everything that's in here. Fiscal impact. The proposed purchase price for the two properties is $800,000. Okay, we're talking about some serious money here, which if accepted would be allocated to the city's general fund, which means it's unrestricted. There's a lot of funds that the city has, and some of them are, most of them are, you can only spend it on this. Like you could only spend it on the sewer system or the water plant or various other things. The general fund is kind of like, that's what the city commission in this case can spend it on, basically whatever they want as for the good of the city. So that's where it's important to recognize there's a lot of different funds. So the $801,000, now once the city commissioners read this, then they're going to discuss what they want to do with it. Do you want to buy? Do you want to sell it? Do you not want to sell it? So there's three appraisals of what these properties are worth. So that you can see there's research here that can be done to prepare to report on this. Now in the meeting, when they're going to say, okay, moving on to item number, let's see, back to the agenda. Moving on to general business, item number 6A, consider agreements for the purchase, lease of these properties. And Dale Martin or somebody on the staff is probably going to give a brief explanation, but won't read everything on that list, on that paper. And then they're going to say, okay, so city council, city commission, we're looking for your direction on what we should do. And then the city commissioners will all give their comments. Eric Cooley is going to say something. Rick Bellhumer is going to say something. Scott Spradley is going to say something. And they're all going to say, like, well, I think we should accept those offers. I think we shouldn't. I think we should do this instead. I'm tired of this issue. It's been dragging on for so long. I think we should do this. And they will eventually come to a point where they say, okay, do we have consent that we're going to, and by the way, when it says regular meeting agenda, that means it's not a workshop, which means they will vote. So there will be something that they're going to do here. Well, actually right here, it says consider agreements. They might not vote on it. They might decide to, ask for more information instead, but there's going to be some kind of action that they're going to take. And in the end, that's what the story is. Who, what, when, where, why. The city commission agreed. So they agreed. That's what they did. They agreed to accept the offer to buy two properties where the city used to run a golf course for the amount of $801,000. Who, what, when, on October 9th at their regular meeting in Flagler Beach. Who, what, when, where, why. So note that the news, that nut graph that we talked about, if you go back here, the nut graph, okay, when you're writing the story, the produce, write the nut graph. And once you do that, then a lot of times the structure is like this. Write the nut graph, include a key quote that comments on the nut graph. This is usually paragraph 2 or 3 in the story. So that you'll just find if you read a lot of these kind of meeting stories, you have a lead sometimes that's different, and then you have the nut graph, who, what, when, where, why. Then you have a quote, and then it's just basically chronological order after that, where you start from the beginning and you go back to this item first came to the city's attention in 2013 when they bought this, and then they bought that. And then the course stopped being used as a golf course because of X, and now they're being bought, and now it's being purchased. Okay, that kind of catches you up to speed, right? And then you talk about what the discussion was in the meeting. Eric Cooley said this. He felt this way about it. Scott Spradley disagreed. Rick Bellhumer thought that they should do X. And in the end, they agreed to not make a decision, but ask for more information. Period. That could be the whole story. And you're all done. And you know, then you write the headline, which hopefully then capitalizes on the specificity, priority, irony, and the T's. Here's why. That could be one way to start, you know, some stories. Or sometimes asking the headline can be in the form of a question, like, why should Flagler Beach pay $800,000 for a property that's only worth $500,000? So, you know, something along those lines. That's not getting enough specificity, but you write the headline, you got the story. I would write the headline last, but sometimes you can write it first, you know, if you kind of already know what's going on. You're thinking in terms of the currency, right? Headlines are the currency of the news. I'm going to this meeting and my goal is to get 2 headlines out of it, but I might be able to get 5. And even if I don't write them all right then, I kind of know what I'm going to do. Like I could write another story tomorrow based on this, or another story here, because it's not quite as important, not quite as urgent, but it's something that I think a lot of people would still care about. And I'm trying to be comprehensive here. Could I write a story about A through E? Maybe. Maybe if they talk about it, but they don't make a decision and they move on, you think, no, I'll just catch that. They said they're going to talk about it at the next meeting, so maybe I'll just wait till that one to really worry about it. Or sometimes you can combine 2 items into one. Maybe they're very related and you could, you know, do it that way. But each time you put a new headline with a picture on the website, that gives people another chance to engage with the community, to feel connected to what's happening, and to really, if they're really big on that issue, then you want to inform them. You're right. You're providing them with that local history to make it so that they can, again, build bridges of understanding. They see that the government is now transparent, and that hopefully builds more trust and, you know, reduces the amount of kind of like strife and contention and division in the world and in our community. So that's, again, why we're doing what we're doing. So that's kind of like a brief explanation of this agenda. We haven't gone through all of them, and I think that it's something that I don't want to, like, you know, belabor, but just a real brief kind of glance at this. A change order submitted by this company that's designing the pier, or removing the pier, for delays incurred during the pier removal and replacement. So they want this company, which was hired to remove or for the pier removal and replacement. So that means this company wants the city to pay an extra $38,000 because of delays. And there was like a storm that made everything, that slowed things down. And sometimes in these contracts, they have that built in. It's not a big surprise. But you could imagine that maybe some of the city commissioners are like, what? They could have worked through that, or, there could be conflict. So kind of walking through it and think like, where would the passion be here? Where's the conflict? What would make this surprising? And kind of like imagining through it a little bit can really be helpful. Consider a waiver to allow a special event that is longer than 1 day. Now, what is that? This is an example of something where in a government meeting, there's always a reason that these things are on the agenda. It's not just in a vacuum. What would you guess? Why is this event on? Why is this an item on the agenda? What do you think, Lexi?
I think it could be potentially like a community event or something that isn't like, I guess, closed off to people. I'm not really sure. My main guess is really just community event.
Yeah, it's probably a community event. It might be a private company that's doing it. But the point that I was trying to get at is that it's probably because somebody asked for this.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody wants to run an event that is longer than 1 day. And so the only way for that to happen is for them to get a waiver. It's against the law, apparently. The Code of Ordinances basically means the law. It's against the law right now to have a special event that goes longer than 1 day. So somebody wants an exception to that. And they might be very willing to do it. It might be easy. Maybe it's an event that everybody loves and wants to see happen. But let's look at it over here. Now it's under 6C. What's the staff report say? Did that switch over? Yeah, it looks like it. While looking for a code, it was discovered that the Code of Ordinances prohibits events from lasting 1 day in parks. The TNT Craft Show has held its 2-day events in Veterans Park 3 times per year. They've always had positive feedback. Therefore, we want a temporary waiver so they can keep doing that in the rest of the year. And they usually get this much money. Fiscal impact is always something to keep in mind to report on, right? So recommendation, say, let's approve it. Approve a waiver for just these events. So is this going to be a big deal? Who knows? Is the city commission going to be really passionate about this? I don't know. What is the TNT Craft Show? I don't even know what that is. They're probably going to discuss it at the meeting and say what that is. But it could be that some city commissioners have had really bad experience with the TNT Craft Show, something like that, and they do not want this to get an exception. Others might say, yeah, this has been great and we'll do a waiver. Some would say, well, why would we give a waiver to them and not to this other company? And there could be some discussion about it. And that's something to keep in mind with these stories is there's the specifics and then there's the overall principle. There's the policy that they might be feeling like they need to change the overall policy, not just give one exception, because they can't play favorites if you're the government. You have to be fair. So is that going to be a big story? I don't know. But now we're prepared going into it. We know where to find it. We know where to get the details. And we can go back to the agenda. Consider a waiver. Approve a change order for slip lining, $15,000. Probably nothing really interesting there. Interlocal agreement for public school facility planning. Are they talking about possibly planning a school? I don't know. Building a new school? Not really sure, but that's something we're going to talk about. Public hearings. This is the big one. Annex property. That means there's property that is currently not in the city limits of Flagler Beach, and they're going to redraw the boundaries of the city to include this part of the city. It's 210 acres. This happens to be a big development called Veranda Bay. It's been controversial because it's going to add thousands of homes potentially, Veranda Bay. And so a lot of people do not want Veranda Bay to be built at all, but it's also going to build a whole lot of homes, and they're going to be really nice, and it's going to bring a lot of property taxes to the city that could totally change the finances of the city. That's some of the background that I know because I've been following the issue. But this request to annex is a big deal. It's been, the last time this came before the city commission, it was paused because of a lawsuit, because somebody at the last second came up with a letter from a lawyer saying, hey, you can't annex because if you annex, according to this map, there's going to be what's called an enclave, meaning a little pocket. You know, you're gonna make the whole place go from county to city property, or city in the city boundaries, except this one spot that's still going to be in the county, and that's against the law according to the state laws. So they said, okay, well, I guess, you know, city commission was caught off guard, and they're like, okay, well, I guess we need to wait and let our attorney look at this, and we'll let it come back. Well, now it's back. So this is really what the big issue, I think the big story is in this meeting, is this. And there's probably a lot of backup here. Consider waiver, resolution, First Amendment, ordinance. Okay, so now here we are here. This ordinance, this is where the background is. Staff report, all this other stuff. And then you go to B, which is all the way down here. They've had a lot of, VB application. That's a Veranda Bay application annexation. So then there's another one, which might be related. No, this is Summertown. Annex property, 510 acres. Summertown. I'm not sure what that is. I'm not sure if that's part of Veranda Bay or not. Okay, next down here, ordinance amending the comprehensive plan future land use map, sometimes called the FLUME, for Veranda Bay. So they're making progress. Veranda Bay is making stuff happen here. So they're not only annexing in, now they're going to also change parts of the map so they can put in these residential units, 150 marina berths, slips for boats, right? D, they're going to change the zoning map for 234 acres, again, with Veranda Bay. So changes in their zoning. Another one, Summertown. Not sure what Summertown is. Might be part of Veranda Bay. I'm not sure. 1,640 residential units, 250 hotel rooms. This is big stuff that's happening in Flagler Beach right now. First reading, ordinance, amending the zoning map for Summertown. So we got Summertown and we have Veranda Bay. And then another one, amending the regulations to the platting. Okay, so some of the stuff is pretty difficult to just walk in and know what's going on because there's all these different maps and parts of the code that have to change, and that's kind of intimidating. That's why in these kind of stories, you need someone to help edit it, need to pay close attention to what they're saying in the meetings from the staff, might need to get clarification afterward. But that's also why they have staff reports on every one of these. So the background is there. If you read it, you probably say, okay, that's what's happening. They're recommending that they do this. Well, I can just, you know, kind of use that same kind of type of wording. And I know that's what's happening in the story. So it doesn't have to be super intimidating, but it is something that, you know, there's a little bit of homework to kind of make sure that it's clear what's happening. It's 5:49, so we're going to be done in just a few minutes. But we now walked through this city commission meeting agenda. At the very end, after they do all that, city attorney and city manager might say other stuff, which again could be newsworthy. They don't say what they're going to do, but they could say like, yeah, we had a real big problem with this fire engine and you know, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe there's a story there that is worth pursuing afterward. After the commission, and then the commission comments, each commissioner is going to get a chance to say stuff that's not on the agenda. Then there's more public comments about things not on the agenda. And then they adjourn. So how long is this meeting going to be? Well, it starts at 5:30. I'm guessing the meeting would be at least 3 hours long. And there could be, how many stories are out of here? This is probably a small one. This could be a small one. This could be a small one. This is probably not a story at all. This is probably not a story at all, but it might be. So there could be 3 little briefs. And then there's one big story about Veranda Bay that encompasses all this stuff. There's probably going to be 15 comments from the public coming up to the podium to discuss it, because it's been very, very controversial. Some people are saying, do not allow Veranda Bay to come into the community, because we cannot handle this many people moving in. So it's been a big issue. But that could be one of our biggest stories of the week in the newspaper. This is one that we want to be on the web as soon as we can after the meeting. The other ones could be done on Friday, do one on Saturday, do one on Monday, take your time on these. But basically, this one is a big one that needs to be done basically like that night. And the goal with any kind of government meeting is, I'm going to look at what our standard, process is. But within 3 hours of a meeting being completed, we want to have a story online. Ideally, it's done like as soon as the meeting is over, we're publishing it, because sometimes you can work on it as it's happening. You can do some prep and get it there. But as you can see, sometimes these are it's a big project. I would expect, if it's a reporter in our meetings, one of the reporters that's full-time that has some experience, I would think that this would be about the first story, the Veranda Bay, annexation. It might be like a 5-hour commitment, meaning 3 hours of the meeting and a couple hours of writing. That the first story would be like a 5-hour commitment. And then each one of these other small ones, which again may or may not fully pan out to be stories, but these other small ones, the golf course, the pier removal, each one of those would probably take between 1 and 2 additional hours, depending on how complicated they ended up being based on the meeting. So it might be that 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you're talking about like 9 hours to get everything that you want out of the meeting. Plus, who knows what's happening with the public comment and the public comment at the end, and what the city manager and city attorney say. That doesn't all happen. It doesn't all happen, have to be written that day, but it could be kind of sprinkled, throughout. So to do a really thorough job of each one of these, and they happen twice a month, you're talking about, like I said, around say 9-10 hours in a week. I feel that we are going to want to get a Flagler Beach edition created. And one of the only things that stands in the way of us starting the Flagler Beach Observer is someone who will cover this meeting every time it happens. I want to do it with Bunnell also. They have the same thing going on in Bunnell, and we have no reporter there. We also have Flagler County government. We have a reporter that goes there, but she only can have time to usually do a couple things. And usually there's like 3 or 4 other things that we just don't do because we don't have time. It's Palm Coast City Council. There's these meetings, and we usually do 2 things. And sometimes there's 3 or 4 others that might have been done if we had time for it. So this is where I'm saying, like, I think that there's opportunity for you, Abby and Lexi, to take the reins of one of these, and do it. And with the commitment that I will be available to you. If somebody, I can't go to this one because I'm out of town tomorrow, but, and this one, we might have Sierra cover this. But if one of you wants to go to this meeting tomorrow night, and I might be, it might be that you can't go to it, but you could maybe watch some of it afterward. She might write the Veranda Bay story, but somebody else could write the other ones, the kind of more simple ones that kind of get your feet wet a little bit. And so I want you to think about that. I'll talk to you guys about that, individually another time. But this is kind of this is kind of just an overview of how to do what work is available for us, like right away. And like I said, I'm willing to help continue to do training and kind of like make it as easy as possible for you. So that way you don't feel like so much pressure, like, oh no, what if I get this wrong? Because you can always go back and re-watch and re-listen to the meeting. It's on YouTube. And if we have a question, we can just not publish it yet. Let's get clarification and make it happen. And you might write a story that you think is perfect, and then I'll read it and say, actually, we should double check on that. And then we can work on it together and make sure that it happens. So with that, that's all I got. I know that was a fire hose spraying at you for the last 90 minutes almost. But do any of you have any further thoughts or questions about what it would mean to cover a government meeting for the Observer? Anything from you, Lila? You got anything to say?
Yeah, so I've actually found this all really interesting, as I've never really known much about journaling. So I was not bored at all, and I like how the Observer is based off of finding truth and making sure it's true. And it's kind of a bit of a detective work. So I find that really cool, and it's very interesting. And the part with writing and making it interesting is familiar to me because I've watched videos to help my writing skills as trying to write a book. So I like how it's familiar and it makes sense with how you go about getting information and stuff. And I didn't know about these meetings they do. So I found this really interesting.
All right.
Thanks for letting me come.
Yeah, very good. Glad you could join in. Abby, do you have any questions or comments on any of this?
Yeah, I thought this was all very interesting as well. I guess I just want to clarify. So when I do go to these meetings, you would say probably finish it up, get home, and then right away do the one that is the most prevalent, get that sent to you, that night, and then work on the other ones thereafter.
Yeah, it's not practical to do all of it, that night. I mean, at some point, this Veranda Bay one, it's like with anything. Sometimes you can do a decent job of it in a few hundred words, and sometimes it needs 800 words. Darlene wrote a story about a Volusia County Council story that she wrote. It was 1,900 words.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So it really depends on, the more you know, the more interesting different things seem, because you're like, oh, wow, I can't believe he said that, because you know that there's other baggage and history to it. And when you do it at first, sometimes you don't know all that history, so it's not quite as interesting. But your job and the value that you can bring is to help the rest of the community get caught up to speed on all the things that you know because you've been following it. And when not, go get that information. So yeah, the one story we want to be written that day. Sometimes if it ends late at night, sometimes doing it first thing in the morning is okay.
Okay.
But for the most part, the goal is get the biggest news up as soon as we can. And there are ways to make that more possible. For example, sometimes there's a 300 to 500 word version of the story that doesn't have all the backup to it, doesn't have all the interesting comments, but at least it tells you the who, what, when, where, why. Veranda Bay was approved for its annexation request. That's really the big news, or it was denied. That's the big news. You might be able to put that up with a photo and the headline and 3 paragraphs and publish that night, and then you go in and flesh it more out later. But we want to be the most interested people are going to want to read it that night if possible, or first thing in the morning. So we want to not get too carried away with taking our time with it.
Yeah.
And not every story is big and complicated. It doesn't always have to be like that. Sometimes they're not. But yeah, that's a good question. Anything else from you, Abby?
Sorry, one more. I have a second part to that. So the ones that we would be doing first. Just kind of like run that by you first and be like, hey, this is the one I think is the most important right now. Do you agree?
Yeah.
What have you?
I think that makes sense. Like the story selection is definitely a big part of it. And sometimes you might think there's 3 stories out of here, and they're all fairly equal in their interest in the community. But the first one is easy, and I could do that in 30 minutes and be done with it. Sometimes that's fine. Do the harder one tomorrow when you got a little more, energy. But sometimes we got to do the hard one, that night. So it just depends. We have to be practical at some point, but we also have to realize that, that's just one of the parts about the job is sometimes like it is making it happen that night. So.
Yeah. And I would love to come tomorrow, but I actually have to work. Are there any other ones for the month of October? Didn't you say there was 2?
Yeah, I think there's 2 a month for basically all these government boards.
Okay.
So we can talk about like a schedule and how that would all work. I think Lexi, Abby, and I talked a little bit about Flagler Beach possibly being a good fit for her since she lives on the beach side in North Ormond. So that might make sense, for her to kind of cover that. But again, we could talk about all that stuff and figure out what everybody's interested in. But Lexi, what's your thoughts on this? Do you have any questions or any kind of comments?
Well, for one, I just appreciate you like taking the time to teach us and shape us into really great journalists. I see like the agenda's a lot like how they set it up for the school board meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So I am pretty familiar with like how that works. But I always think that it's really helpful just for like the few school board meetings I did cover. It made it really helpful because you'll have a question and go back and read the report and it's answered right there for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely makes it easier so you're not having to always track down somebody. And then, yeah, I'm just excited to get started.
All right. Very
Yeah,
good.
thank you, Brian.
So I didn't scare anybody off by all this. That's good to know. It's not for everybody. I mean, it's just not like not every, and you guys have said before, creative writing is what's exciting. And that's great. But there's a lot of transferable skills to doing this kind of work as well. And like Lila said, there's also that kind of detective kind of like, idea, and being the first to know is, it's kind of cool to like be there on the front lines of some of the big things that people are going to be talking about the rest of the week and that they have been talking about. And you're the one who gets to see it happen in real life as these votes happen. It's kind of like, watching history unfold. So I actually like doing government meetings, and I think they can be kind of exciting, and that you're doing something really important. So that always feels good too. So I'll catch up with you guys sometime soon. I'm going to stop the recording here, and thank you very much for being so attentive and listening to such a long rambling explanation. But
Thank you. For your time and
as you
for
can see, I believe a lot in the importance of what we're doing. So thanks for being willing to talk through it.